Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Berryman here, coalition builder and founder of Bringing Humanity Together. And you know what that means? If it is Wonderful Wednesday, there will be conversations for humanity in store for all of us. I know it's been a while, but we do have a special guest today and a great friend of mine and also of the program, Gayle. It will be sharing her story with us today on Conversations for Humanity, and she was just so humbled and honored enough. She signed up for it. But get this, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't reach out to her first. She reached out to me over the weekend, said, "Hey, Chris, you gotta be ready now." And I'm like, "What?" And everything. So I was just, I kid you not, Gayle. When you sent me that message, I'm like, no guest has ever actually proactively said, "Hey, you know what? You gotta be ready for your show." And I'm like, "Okay." So there you go. There's a first for everything. But Gayle, we're glad that you are here today. How are you doing on Wonderful Wednesday?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you for having me, Chris. And yes, I do take a proactive approach to these conversations and these opportunities. It really means a lot to me to be on your show and having this conversation with you today.
Well, I'm so humbled and honored. And you even said yesterday, Jamie, when we talked about, how the show would go and everything like that. She's like, I kid you not, when you said, "Chris, we got to talk again," I was like, yes, we got to do that and everything. And I'm just so humbled and honored by that because me and you have been connected for a very long time. But I want to go to that note of what you just shared, Gayle, about being proactive and everything. I truly believe being proactive is a great thing in and of itself. But I know you probably will touch on that here in just a little bit. But if you could, Gayle, please introduce yourself to us and to the audience of literally who is Gayle, not what Gayle does, because I truly believe the better question to ask is not what you do, is who are you. So kind of tell us, who is Gayle?
Yes, and I love that you asked that question again. I remember the first time we spoke. That is how we started our conversation, is talking about who we are. And so I was anticipating that you might ask that again. And like most people, I am a person of many things with many roles. And I think what I want to bring forward today, Chris, is that I really am a stand for number one, uh, healthy, authentic relationships across the board, whether that's professionally or personally. And we'll get into why that is probably later in the show. I am also a stand for love and compassion and unity. I am also a stand for really taking care of oneself and taking care of each other. So these are things that I value. These are things that I intentionally practice in presence in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I also happen to be a mother. I'm a business owner. I'm, a communications and emotional wellness coach. So, like I said, I wear a lot of different hats and show up in a lot of different roles. And at the end of the day, for me, I'm really about, being authentic, connected, grounded, and present. So that's me in a nutshell.
And I loved you said present because to me, Gayle, the greatest present that we can ever get or even have is that present moment, is it not?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that in my experience personally, and I think that this is not unique to me. There were many times in my life where I was living in the past in my present, or
Mm-hmm.
worrying about the future in my present. And yet we're always in the present. We can we can bring that future focused anxiety into our present. We can bring that past into our present, and it has an impact on us, and it has an impact on the people around us. And that it's part of why, for me, once I recognized just how impactful that can be, that really being present, not stuck either in the past or worried about the future, and just being here and now and grounded, became such a powerful practice for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really started, it sounds simple, and yet it really started to shift so much in my life. And so much, it really kind of helped regulate my nervous system, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest with you, is really being present, actively listening to people, really being curious about what's going on in the world around you, or the people around you. And it's made
Right.
a big difference.
Right. And to me, being present in the present moment is a big thing because, again, I will go to what probably a lot of us have been taught in one way, shape, matter, or form is that listening is not only an art form, but it's literally a state of being when you really think about it. Because if you are actively, truly listening, because see, we can hear people all day long, because hearing is totally different than listening. Because if you let it go in one ear and out the other, and we've probably been told that by our parents and our grandparents and aunt and uncles and that kind of thing. I kid you not, when I was taught that as a kid, I didn't really take heed of that and everything because my dad said told me all the time. He's like, Chris, if you let it go in one ear and out the other, you didn't really listen to somebody. You just heard them. And I was thinking to myself, that doesn't make sense because if I heard it in my ear, it kind of would stay. It wouldn't go out the other side. And I'm thinking to myself, years later, he was absolutely right. We really don't take heed and understand the power of not only of listening, but actually, like what you said earlier about being proactive. If we're not proactive, even in the conversation in and of itself, then we're going to have things kind of maybe fall on deaf ears. What do you say to that?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and sharing, what your dad would say to you about that. And we've all heard that expression, right? In one ear, out the other. And that is the difference between actively listening and hearing. We hear things all day long, but we don't necessarily process it or absorb it, or truly hear it with our hearts. And it's a skill, it's a practice, it is intentional, it is proactive, and it's not something we're necessarily taught we're not necessarily taught this in school. We're not necessarily taught this in our families or in our homes. We might be, but it's not given. It's not like we show up here and we're handed a communications handbook.
Right?
We learn often how to gain these skills by feeling the impacts of not using these skills.
Right.
So it's the same for me. I mean, I've always been, God put me on this earth with certain communication abilities, certain strengths there.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I've been a perfect communicator by any means, right?
Right.
It's something that I'm intentional about, conscious about, something that I practice, and that, again, not unique to me. Anybody can do that.
Right.
Anybody can learn those skills. Anybody can learn to listen and validate, and um, even not speak, right?
Right.
not not speak, simply be there while someone else is speaking, right?
Right.
That's also communication. How we are in our presence and in our body, not only our speech, but how we're showing up in the world is communication. And anybody can do that. It takes desire and commitment. That's what it takes.
Yeah, and on that note, it really comes to mind of the great book, which the very same title is actually of the very book from John C. Maxwell, which is Everyone Communicates, You Connect. And I gotta ask you, Gayle, in your journey, in which I know you're gonna get more into it here in just a minute, how's that effective communication have started with you on the journey that you're on now, gone from being that little girl in Massachusetts and going through high school and, of course, elementary school and maybe even college, how has that communication probably evolved over time in your lifetime? How's that occurred for you in your journey in and of itself?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this, Chris, is because I know what it's like to feel like I'm not being heard. I'm not being seen, right? I know deeply the pain of that. When I was a child, and for anybody who's tuning in, just a little, content warning here. I made a promise at one point in my childhood to stay silent after experiencing abuse. And fear really kept me from speaking up for many years. When I finally was brave enough to break my silence, and I told the adults around me about what was happening, they didn't believe me. And that number one, I didn't at all imagine that that's what was going to happen. Part of the reason why I didn't speak up is because I had this whole other vision and story of what the consequences of that would be. Never in my thought process did I imagine that it would just be ignored and swept under the rug. So
Mm-hmm.
I was really not prepared for that at all. And it had a very deep and lasting impact on me. And it left me feeling very confused. And I really felt like I didn't know that this was happening at the time, but part of my survival strategy was to be invisible, to make myself smaller, to not be your target.
Mm-hmm.
And that followed me into adulthood. So in 2013, when I launched my business, The Story Stylist, I was still struggling with a lot of that, subconsciously still struggling
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of that. Despite the fact that I had this, 15-year career leading up to that in communications, in PR and journalism, marketing communications, and also just naturally having a strength there, I still struggled very deeply with a lot of these things. And it was going into business that brought that awareness forward for me, because I was working with clients and I was actually helping them find and craft and share their signature stories, the stories behind the work that they were doing. And we'd get into a room and they would open up and get real vulnerable. And I was able to see those pieces, right? Like, wow, this is really impactful in your story. And they were expressing what I was feeling about my own story, about sharing my own story.
Mm-hmm.
They were feeling that vulnerability, but it was that vulnerability and that authenticity that was coming out that was so powerful and potent in their stories. And you have to take care of yourself in that process. Many of the clients who naturally came to me, trauma informed how they were showing up in their business, or it informed the creation of their business.
Right.
So I started to get like this sense of, number one, I'm not walking my walk and talking my talk. I need to do some of my own healing around my own story in order to walk my walk and talk my talk. And I also need to do that in order to serve my clients at the level that I wanted to serve them at. And so after a lot of inner conflict and debate within myself of whether or not I was even going to share my story, I ultimately did. That was in 2015, and it changed everything for me. I mean, it changed my business pretty quickly, but I am a vastly different. I'm the same person, but I show up vastly different today than I did in 2015 or 2013 or before that, or even a year ago, because of this journey. Because I, number one, was brave enough to listen to the nudges, because spirit was there, like, you got to tell your story, And I'll be honest, I went kicking and screaming. I did not want to talk about this. And I could not see from that side of things, I couldn't see how that was even related to what I was doing in my business, but it related to everything, right? From learning how to be invisible to be visible, and to do that in a way that felt good for me and felt good for my client, my audience. And this is what my clients wanted too. They wanted to be able to share not the story about the trauma, but the transformation and the healing and the hope. And you have to do that in a very caring and compassionate way to yourself first, right? But also for others. And so that's there's a lot more. There were a lot more steps there, but really my journey taught me that trauma and transformation impacts everyone. It impacts everyone, and we all carry patterns from our past. And when we confront them and we heal them and we work on it, we can create new energy and results, both for ourselves and, if you are supporting others, for those people around us too.
Yeah. And I love that. And see, for me, not only is a story powerful enough that not only, like you said, can transform us, but a story can be powerful enough to even call us not only to act, but maybe even connect. And here's why. When we see our story literally probably maybe unfolding in someone else's story to one extreme or another, or even into a small way or another, it really gets that place of resonation to us in such a degree that we can actually see ourselves. It's like the hero's journey.
Yes, we see ourselves and others and
exactly, other exactly. And for me, if you want to be that hero of the story, you got to recognize, of course, the beginning, the middle, the end of that. But literally, when you really think about it, and a lot of storytellers can do it very well. And I see this play out, especially because I love movies like nobody's business. What a movie will do is, again, my favorite film franchise of all, which is literally transformed my life like you would never know, is Star Wars. But I have to give Marvel credit, though, where credit is due. What Marvel has done in the franchise that they created, which was called the MCU, is they will take a story which they first start with Iron Man, but in the journey of Iron Man, it kind of interconnects to the story of the Black Panther, the story of Captain America, the story of Hulk and Thor and everything like that. So everything is kind of interconnected to each other. But when you kind of watch a Marvel movie and you think it's the end of it, really, actually, it's the next chapter. And I want to go to you on that, Gayle. When you see your story play out, and I'm so glad you're vulnerable with us today, because not many people will share that. But looking back on your journey in and of itself, have you looked on your journey as saying, if I've reached here, I'm not made it here, and I can celebrate the win here, and I don't have to go no further? Have you kind of captured that kind of moment and did it like in a Marvel movie and say, this is not the end, but this is another beginning to a new chapter?
Oh yeah, there's always a new chapter. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's I used to have a hard time, and I think that this was a trauma response, right? For me, I'm a recovering overachiever. So for me, for many years, it was like I'd set a goal and I'd get the goal. I set a goal and then I get the goal. I never took the time to stop and not only stop and celebrate, stop and reflect on that journey, that to get to that point. And that really kind of led me to a dark place. Actually, in 2019, right before the pandemic, I had checked off all the boxes. I had created what I said that I wanted in my life. I had the kids, I had the family, I had the husband, I shouldn't say had, I have, because I still have all of this, right? The home, right down to so cliche, the white picket fence, okay? The business, right? And 2019 was the best year of my business. And yet I remember very distinctly getting to a point in that year and saying, I have everything I said I wanted, and I am not happy. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my word.
Yes. So I think I love that you're asking this question, because sometimes that's what we do, right? There's no judgment here at all. Like, this is sometimes what we have to do, what we find ourselves doing, going through life on autopilot, being in a trauma. I'm not saying everybody's in a trauma response. I do, looking back on it now, I think that was my pattern. That was my coping mechanism.
Yeah.
I never really kind of taking a moment to just pause and reflect and check in and tune in with myself. Like, is this really what I want? Or is it just something I think I want? And so I had to really pull, like, it was a moment that freaked me out.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be completely honest, but it was such an important moment for me to recognize, wow, I've done all the things that I said I wanted to do. I have all the things that I said I wanted to have. And it's not that I no longer wanted those things, but it was like, okay, why am I not happy? And I knew that there was a chapter that was going to be closing and a chapter that was going to be opening, because that's life.
Yeah.
We go through cycles. It is not a linear thing. We spiral, we go through cycles. I mean, all you have to do is look out the window. Well, I know you're not in New England, but all I have to do is look out the window and we see the changing of the seasons, right? Every year, it happens every year, but it changes. It's a cycle, it's a rhythm, and our lives are no different. And so I love this question about, I love the comparison to Marvel, and how it's like, it's not, the journey's not ever over. It's never over. Even, I think, my opinion, only my personal opinion, but it's not over when we're dead either, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that question. And yeah, it's literally the next chapter.
Well, I got another one for you, because you sparked another question in my head, and I can't believe I'm getting ready to ask you this, but let me ask you this. From a general perspective, and looking back on your journey, and I'm sure you've talked to many people along the way, why is it that when we do meet, let's say, that goal, or we finish that chapter, or whatever the case may be, why do people kind of say, "Oh my gosh, I'm not happy with this, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that"? It's almost like they compare themselves, and I kid you not, and I want to bring this into the mix. It's like, why in the Sam Hill that we put an expectation on the end result that we are wanting, and then when, like you said, when you get there and you're like, well, I'm not happy. Well, why is that? Why do we, again, put that level of expectation so high in our lives to such a degree that if we don't meet that goal or meet that end result, that journey is not literally complete enough, because then we're not satisfied enough? I mean, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for each person. I'll speak from my perspective. I think that in my experience, and what I notice about people in general, is that we have learned to be very externally motivated. We're looking outside of ourselves often for whatever it is that we're wanting, whether that's joy, happiness, abundance. I'm not talking about things. I'm talking about the feelings, right?
Right.
And I think part of that is simply being human. When we're children, when we're babies, we're dependent on something and someone outside of us to survive, right? And so it's just part of being human. At some point, though, we have the choice and the power to be internally focused and to actually create those feelings from the inside out. Chris,
So
I don't know. Did I lose you?
and
Okay. You went off the screen.
I was putting that spotlight on you. But and again, I'm the kind of firm believer, Gayle. There's no one way to be, or no one way to lead. There's so many different ways to do that. It's like you just said earlier about if you had that book to communication. If you already knew what was in that very book, you wouldn't need that book in the first place. And what really speaks to me right now, and I kid you not, it's something that's been on my mind lately, and we even talked about this in our Coffee with Chris call today. I want to get your take on it. When it comes to confidence, whether it be in communication or anything else in our lives, can our community help us build up that confidence, or even better level up our communication because of the people that's involved in that very community? How's that played out in your world?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Yes, I do think that. I think that absolutely community, the right community, a community of people, whether it's 2 people or 200 people, where we're aligned and feeling supported, can make all the difference. I know for me, not only am I a recovering overachiever, but a recovering lone wolf for many years. I was basically left to figure things out on my own, and there are advantages to that, right? Um, there were challenges to that, and I really needed to relearn how to trust people and how to use my discernment to choose people who choose me, who can support me. And that took a long time. And what got me to that place is taking a chance on a community that knew how to support me in that way.
Right.
So yes, 100%. I'm with you. Sometimes it takes time to find out who your people really are, but man, when you find that friend or that colleague or that support group that really truly is about raising you and each other up, that is powerful, powerful medicine.
It is. It is. And since you have said that you have been a recovering overachiever, and I would have never guessed it in and of itself in a million years, I got to ask you, what was the event or series of events that said to you that I don't have to be an overachiever anymore? How did that process play out?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's been one specific event. I think it's just been a series of revelations of getting to that place of it, number one, accepting myself for who I am, flaws and all. And realizing I'm enough as I am, that I didn't have to prove myself to be worthy of whatever. For me, I think the story really was I have to prove myself to be worthy of love. I have to fight for love. I have to convince people to see me, to hear me. I turned 50 this year, so I think some of this is wisdom and age as well. Like just
Yeah.
kind of getting to that point of like, what, you either get me or you don't. And either way, that's okay. I no longer have, I'm no longer available to be convincing people about who I am and what my value is and all of that. It's like you're either there or you're not. And
Right.
that's okay. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. But that was a long journey, Chris. I'll be honest. That was a long journey, and it was a series of things, from things happening in relationships, from things happening in my business, from that community that I found that was supporting me in my transformation. So it's a number of things. It's been a number of things.
And I'm glad you bring that up because, like I said, when we were having that discussion today on Coffee with Chris, a lot of people were resonating with it because, and I will share with you the very video that actually inspired the call, and I'll share that with you offline. But they talk about in the very video that uh, part of it is about recognizing the community that can help, like you said, uplift you and everything like that, and that confidence does come. It's just like when I shared on today's call that there, and I kid you not, and I said this to the people on the call. There's this YouTube video, and I still have to go find it because it's a powerful one. It's from a TEDx talk, in fact, that where this guy was originally from England as a military guy. He was all about IEDs and bombs and diffusing them and all those kind of things. And then he moved over to Australia, but then yet he was called to serve in Iraq during the Iraq War. And what he ended up doing is when he got that call, hey, it's over here by this street, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we'll be there and everything like that. Now, mind you, when he got that call, everyone's ready to go there, bing, bang, boom. But then I remember, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the kind of synopsis of this, is when he got there, he kind of said, when I got there, I kind of looked at the bomb, saw it where it was, because he had to look for him from a distance a little bit. But he froze, literally froze, and like he was like Han Solo on Carbonite. He was just like, just frozen there. But if he said in the very video that I'll share with you guys, is it just seemed like it was like forever in time. But then his number two in command with them kind of gave him this nudge and say, hey, Sarge, we got this. We trained for this.
Mm.
And that really spoke to me in and of itself. Because, like I said, when I saw the original video that we talked about today from a great community member of ours here at Bringing Humanity Together, Janelle, she ended up saying confidence is something from a place of community. And I kind of think to myself, I've never really thought of that. That confidence can come from the comprised people within that very community, whether it be work related or not, but really can have that effect. But then again, like I said, it tied in so well with that other one too as well, because if a guy who can be frozen in time and then his number two says, hey, Sarge, we got this, that just totally interconnected everything.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring this up. I was having a conversation with my sister earlier today about, I'm not sure how much of this I can get into. So just sort of feeling into how much of the story can I share. She was sharing a story about a working environment and the difference between working with people who have your back,
Right.
and working with people who are, on a power trip, essentially. And the company that she works for, they talk about, take care of yourself, take care of each other. And yet there are employees in that company who are not following those values. And there is something so potent about being around people who have your back in those moments of, being frozen or in those moments of vulnerability. It's easy to be around people who, have it all together, or, are just a pleasure to be around. But even people who are a pleasure to be around have their challenges. They might make it look simple, and they might make it look like their life is perfect. No one's life is perfect. And it's one thing to be able to, have somebody's back when things are going well. It's another thing altogether when you're able to roll up your sleeves and get in the mud with your sergeant or your employee or your family or your friend. That's a different kind of love. That's a different kind of compassion. That's a different kind of caring. And so that's what I'm hearing in the story that you're sharing with this.
Yeah, yeah,
This
and I truly believe in that because again, John C. Maxwell says it best: nobody knows how much you know until they know how much you care. And if
great
they
quote.
truly see that level of care, not only will that confidence ring true to a lot of them and ring true to their heart of hearts, but then again, they can be like that sergeant next to them and say, "Hey, I'm gonna give you this little nudge. Hey, you got this," even if they're in a place of leadership or not.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for this sergeant, but we expect our leaders to be, you know, impermeable. Or wait, I don't know if that's the right word, but well, that might not be something that we expect from somebody in that role. Right. And so that
Right?
was a very vulnerable moment, and that could have gone a lot of different ways. And yet
Absolutely.
his men had him. They recognized, like, this can happen to anybody. This man is a leader, and he's having a moment. He's human, you know, he's human. He's not a robot. He's going to have moments like this where he's reacting and feeling things and afraid. And that's actually normal. And we're going to come together and support him.
And that goes to my next question: is why have we, on a general consensus, probably for a lot of us on this great earth, whether it be in business or not, we again look to that level of leadership for them to almost like be the Tony Stark of everything, that they are impregnable to the very things that are being thrown at them, that they literally have that Iron Man suit on each and every single day. They can't be vulnerable. They can't say that they can end up bowing down to this, that, and the other. They're literally of the very antithesis of what leadership should be. But I got to ask you, Gayle, have we really looked at leadership in really the reverse dichotomy of that? That we really say, hey, these people are the most perfect people on the planet and everything. And what we have done is put them on that high pedestal when in fact we should be doing the opposite of that and just meeting them where they're at, even if they're in a place of leadership or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you just said is key, is being able to meet people where they're at, and to accept that. And sometimes that's hard. I'll be honest, like sometimes that's hard, because sometimes meeting people where they're at, it isn't going to work for you on a sustained basis. So let me see if I can get a little bit more specific with that. I'm not advocating for bad behavior. Let's put it that way, right?
Right?
Like sometimes people are going to have toxic behaviors. For example, we're talking about leadership, and so sometimes there's toxic leaders, sometimes there's toxic employees, and this is not to say that meeting them where those particular leaders and employees where they are, that we're letting that go.
Right?
That's not. It's accepting, okay, this is happening, and we're going to have a conversation about that, and
Right?
there are going to be natural consequences of that, and you have the choice to change or not. That's also meeting people where they're at. On the flip side of that is like this, this putting people on a pedestal and expecting them to be perfect. No one can live up to that. And our leaders, whether you're a community leader or a corporate leader or a leader of one, a leader of
Yep.
yourself, right? It's a strength. It's a strength to be real and vulnerable. You need to learn how to take care of yourself, how to manage that. That doesn't mean it's okay to then be like, hey, I'm feeling all these things and I'm going to go take it out on people. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah.
But leaders are going to feel what they feel, and that's okay. And society, I agree. Like, I don't think that society has made it okay. We've been taught to be so fearful of our emotions and our feelings. I mean, so many of us, myself included, live, not anymore for me, but live from the neck up, right? We're in
Right.
our heads where we don't want to feel anything in our bodies. We don't want to feel anything in our hearts. We're so cut off from our emotions and the sensations in our body. And I think that's, my hope, and part of the work that I do with my clients is really about helping humanity to open back up again in ways where, and this is possible. I mean, I was the least likely person to be to even do this for myself, right? Lived in my head for many, many, many years. You can open yourself up and still be protected. We think about boundaries. I got a great story. I know I'm talking a lot right now, but I do have a great story here. We think about boundaries, and I know for me, when I started practicing boundaries, it was more like the electric fence.
Yeah.
And then I did this horse experience. I went to a farm and I was working with this horse. His name's Saint, and I was specifically working on things like leadership in this session. And I did this exercise where Saint's owner gave me a piece of rope, and she was like, okay, make a boundary around you with this rope. And so I did that. So number one, just that in and of itself, I realized, okay, this is basically, it wasn't a perfect circle, but it's a loop around me in the ground. There's no wall here, right? And the horse was challenging me. He didn't care about my boundary.
Yeah.
He didn't care about my boundary. I had to change my energy and the way I was showing up in that circle in order for him to respect that boundary, right? So it's not that there was a wall there. There was a line. I had a line, literally had a line in the sand, but also I had to change. I had to shift from within. So
Yeah. And that's very powerful. And for me, in my experience, that shift wasn't there for a lot of people that I met. There's only been a very few people that actually looked not only outside of themselves, but they really looked inward to themselves and really recognized their level of leadership. And I got to ask you this because it just hit me like a ton of bricks of what you just shared there. In your journey, if you had to pick out, let's say, a handful of leaders, which of the leaders that you can come up with right now that you can know of that really made leadership not about them but literally about others, who would those people in your life, whether it be family related or not, I really don't care which, but who would those, probably like I said, handful of people that really stepped up to the plate, not only in their level of leadership but showing who they really were?
I love this question. And I talk a lot about bold and gentle leadership, and it is perfect for summarizing the story with the horse, because it's, for me, it's I mean, I can definitely, names are popping up in my head, but before I share that, it's a way of being. You know, a leader that you're describing really is bold and gentle. It's about doing no harm and taking no BS.
Yeah.
And when I think of leaders who are like that, or who remind me of that, I often refer to Jesus, and I often refer to Martin Luther King. I often reference Audre Lorde, because she's all about speaking up, and she's a poet and civil rights activist. These are people who are gentle and fierce, and they were about the collective. They're about humanity. They're not, their leadership to me is about humanity and love and change and transformation. It's not about the Jesus show or the MLK show or Audra show. You know what I mean? There's a higher purpose there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love that. So for me, like I said, there was only a few people that really stood out to me. One, actually, I can name by name. Um, he was just a ordinary guy at McDonald's when I was there, and I started at McDonald's no less at 16 years old. But his name was Craig Bishop, and Craig really took me under his wing. He said, for you to be an effective leader, you got to not only lead from the front, but also you got to lead from behind. And I really didn't take heed of that at that point, but he really changed the face of what leadership kind of looked like to me. And there's been a few other than him too as well that have done that. But I got to go to this with you because it has really been on my mind since probably early this morning. And I want to get your take about this. What's your view when it comes to concentrated interest? What's that show up for you when you hear something like that? What does that mean to you?
Concentrated interest. I've never.
Well, the reason why I say that, especially in the context of what we're talking about today about your story, this is the very definition of it, and it just blew my mind when I heard this. Concentrated interest is about a small group of people, each of whom cares a lot about an issue. Diffused interest, though, which is the counterintuitive to that, is a large group of people who cares little about an issue. Then does that blow your mind?
That is interesting. Yeah. I've never heard that before, and thank you for sharing that and sharing, the differences of concentrated and diffused. And when I hear concentrated interest, what it sparks in me is mission. A group of people working together on a shared mission.
Right.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, especially not only from my experience, but from your experience, that concentrated interest can be not only from a few, but it can turn into many when they not only share what they share, but probably maybe be in alignment with it or in agreement with it, or it can even be both, or it doesn't even have to be neither at all. It's just they understand their place in space within that context. Because again, not every team is going to be perfect on every single team player, so to speak. There's going to be some people that may say, hey, I'm only here for the money. I'm not worried about the rings. I could care less than that. Pay me the money and show me the money and that kind of thing. But there's some people, though, Gayle, who want to end up saying, I'm not about the rings. I'm not about the money. I want to end up moving this team forward to such an extent. It's not even about me. But then again, when people get that buy-in because of that, I truly believe that concentrated interest will be more powerful because, again, everyone has a hand in that, because not only can they do it, but I truly believe in my heart of hearts, Gayle, and I've said this many times, I truly believe that choice is the ultimate path to freedom. And if you give people that choice, game on.
Mm, yeah. 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 And I think that there's a place, like, we live in an expansive world. And so there's a place for all of that, especially when we're either leading or being led from a place of harnessing the energy, harnessing
Mm-hmm.
the different energies, right? So that person who's like, hey, I'm here for the money and the rings. Well, they might have some skills, or so, like, they still have value, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
about really learning how do we tap into what you're great at, and working with that energy to get that buy-in for the bigger picture, right? On the flip side, the person who's like, yeah, I'm here for the vision and the mission and I don't care about the winning and the rings and the money and all the tangible items, right? They have a different set of skills, and they have equal value, right? And
Right.
so and I think that's a leadership mastery, to, again, like we were talking about, meeting people where they are, and then also trying to get them on the same page, right? So, like, that
Yeah.
is a challenge of leadership. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And,
seeing
and
the
see that.
value in everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And see, again, what I've recognized in my own experience is the best way you can do that is you got to make literally everything about them and not about you at all. Because then again, if you put the needs of the many over the needs of the one or the few, sometimes it may not work out that way, but then again, it kind of will. Because when you think about it, if you put the needs of one ahead of others, and they go end up saying, "Why do you only put the needs of Chris ahead of me?" Well, because maybe Chris may need that. But then again, the thing then becomes is they're going to end up saying, and some people may think this first and say, that kind of is not fair that he's putting the needs of Chris over me. But then again, maybe over time, when people do take the time to find out how they're doing, how things are going at soccer practice, how well are the kids doing in arts class, and everything like that, when people start seeing that on a consistent basis, then they can maybe even be vulnerable enough and say, "Hey, Chris, I had this thing going on uh, after work, and I want you to be a part of it. Can you join us in a trivia night at this local restaurant?" Sure, I'm okay with that, and everything like that. And then maybe those can be the times and present moments that we can get to not only break the ice, but again, like you said, meet them where they are. And then by doing that, they can open up and not only be vulnerable, but then they can recognize that not only do I care about Bob, but Bob's going to end up saying, "Hey, Susie, you got to join the train, so to speak." And then by doing that, you create the dynamic that where when you put that focus on that one, it really actually is a focal point for everyone, even though people don't look at it as such. But it's actually that far and wide kind of dynamic, because there's some people who do have that blinders on, they won't see anything else, and they will only look from their ivory tower and that kind of thing. But then again, I'm the kind of person, I don't want to just look at one person. I want to look at everybody. But then again, if you can't be present in the present moment, even if that's that one person there, again, the very value you bestow upon them can speak volumes, because when they tell what they have heard or seen from you, and they tell it to accounting or they tell it to shipping or whatever the case may be, that speaks volumes. And again, it's also recognizing the focal point where it's all about everybody. But then again, if they see that and it's tangible for them, I say, why not do it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like it's a both and too. So yeah, it's I agree with you. It's not a me over you kind of proposition. It, and I think that in order to in order to make it about others, we also have to really be aware of our needs,
Mm-hmm.
of our own
Absolutely.
personal needs, and make our needs matter in in what we bring into our life, right? Like we have to be clear, what is it that I need, not in a power over people kind of way, but just being radically honest with ourselves, right?
Right.
Like, what is it that I need? And to remember that we're sovereign beings and we're far more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. And we can take care, we're adults. We can, we're talking about adults here. We can make our needs matter, and we can take care of our needs. And we're responsible. We are responsible for ourselves. And when you're dealing with a leader who gets that, who practices that, that leader typically gives from an overflow because they're meeting their own needs.
Right.
They do, and they make their needs matter, and they are able to recognize the needs of others and receive and hear from others, like what they're needing. So I think it's a both I'm not saying that you weren't saying that, but I think it's important to make that distinction for anybody who's tuning in, is that in order to be a leader like that, or just a person, in order to be a human like
Just be
that,
human.
in order to be human, you need to take care of yourself. You need to fill your own cup. We all know the airplane spiel,
Yeah.
right? Like, put your own oxygen mask on first. That is, gosh, that has been, there's many of us who are compassionate, and we overgive, and then what happens, right? We get sick, we're burnt out, we're going through some sort of crisis because we're not taking care of our own needs first. And I've lived that, I've been there, I've done that. And it's really important to whatever that looks like for you. How that looks for me is going to look different for you, Chris. It's going to look different for somebody who's tuning in right now. And it's important to figure out what that is. And I'm not just talking about self-care on a don't get me wrong, I love going to the spa. I'm not just talking about self-care on a superficial level. I mean, on a really deep level. Like, take care of yourself.
Yep.
What does that look like for you? In fact, a challenge for everyone who's tuning in is to take 5, 10, 15 minutes this week and really get quiet and ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need right now? What do I need this week? What do I need this year? And just listen and be open to that response and honor it,
Yep.
acknowledge it and honor it, and do what you need to do to make that need matter.
Yep. Yep. And I love that. And I'll actually take it one step further. And you probably might like this or might not, but I had to share this because it was really on my heart when you were sharing that. Maybe we should also ask ourselves, Gayle, what we are willing to give up. What are we
Mm.
willing to say, hey, maybe not today. Maybe I got to recognize that in and of itself. And by just allowing that to be there, uh, I truly believe is what are you willing to kind of let go? And
Yes.
for me, if you're willing to let things go, it's not kind of like I need to have now or I should have now. It's about recognizing there's a kind of level dynamic in play. And here's
Yeah.
why I say that. Because if we're on a life level kind of dynamic that everything's built on levels, then we just got to understand what level do I want to go? How do I want to get there? And everything. And then maybe recognizing everything's done from my maybe what's really good for me in that present moment. And it's not, and not necessarily a selfish thing. It's something that just shows up for us
Mhm.
individually in scope. But I truly believe it's about recognizing that because see, what probably may have worked good for you yesterday may
Mhm.
not work good 10 weeks from now. It could be a completely different thing because what's the one constant? It's change. So I just recognize that fact.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I mean, that is part of the process of change and transformation, is that we can't bring it all with us. And there are a lot of things that worked for us at some point in our life that maybe may no longer be working for us. And
Yep.
in order to, be present, like we started with this conversation, um, we may have to release some things, right?
Yep.
Whether that's habits or thought patterns, or sometimes it's people, sometimes it's jobs, sometimes it's relationships, right? um, in order to step into that highest and best version of ourselves, sometimes we do have to let things go. And I love your question of coupling that with what do I need, and what do I need to let go of. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So, Gayle, I love this conversation. I'm sure we can go hours and hours and
Yes.
hours on it. I'm sure we could, and we probably will. Just not right now here and everything like that today. But I want to give you some time to kind of maybe share a parting word of thought, or maybe some wonderful wisdom on Wonderful Wednesday. And I want to give the microphone over to you. So please share your final thoughts for today on Conversations for Humanity.
Oh gosh. Well, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today. So I would say my parting thoughts. I know that there's a lot up in the world right now, and so I'd like to say be kind to yourself, be kind to others, um, be honest, feel what you need to feel, and take care of yourself. And if this is resonating with you and you want to talk more with me, I'm always open to a conversation. Chris will tell you that. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at my website, GayleNowak.com. And you can see the spelling there. People are always asking me how to spell my name. So I'm more than happy to talk with anybody who wants to have a conversation and talk more about the topics we've covered today. And Chris, thank you from the bottom of my heart for this
And
opportunity.
I can tell you right now, I'll be ready for that next conversation with you. I'm putting it out there right now. I'll be first in line. Just saying. But again, Gayle, thank you so much for not only being vulnerable, but again, showing up as always. And again, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, if you guys want to share your story with us on Conversations for Humanity, all you have to do, and I will put it in the comment section, whether it be on YouTube, Facebook, or in here on LinkedIn. Come share your story. Go to calendly.com/guest BHT/CFH, and we would love for you to come share your story on Conversations for Humanity. And as always, Gayle, thank you so much for taking time with us. We greatly appreciate you, and we'll talk soon. And thank you for your time today, and you have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thank you, Chris. You too. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thanks for your time and energy.
All right, you guys have a great day. Make it today a wonderful Wednesday. We'll see you on the next Conversation for Humanity.